Hello and welcome back to Schellhammer TV. Again, I'm here with Dr. Schellhammer himself. Now, during our last discussion, we focused mainly on the development of early childhood years. If you missed that, you can check on our webpage and catch up. We also discussed the prenatal development, which can also be found on our webpage. Now, today, Dr. Schellhammer, I want us to kind of go into something you mentioned during our last discussion, which was the mental functions we develop during prenatal time and how they continue to develop, obviously, throughout the years. I think a good place to start is looking at from the age of 3 to 6, as that's where we kind of stopped in our last interview. What are the mental functions that we develop during those early years that kind of come into play during those early years as a child?
Yeah, to start with the most important function, that is, we all know it, it's about perception, for example. It is about learning. It is about interpretation. What is going around is about understanding the environment. These are basic functions, but we can say these are the tools to make our life. But we have many more functions. For example, body reactions. For example, our dreams. We have at night, there are also mental functions. Then the communication, the way we talk, or languages, these are mental functions, or in other context I could say these are the tools we need to make a life. Because without mental functions, we cannot function.
Okay, so when we say mental functions, we are really discussing cognitive development and how enhanced areas can obviously allow us to function in a more efficient way, or if the functions aren't developed, in a less able way. Is that correct?
Yeah, there is a basic way of perception, obviously. So what people see around, what is the reality, but this is often not really the important reality. The reality is behind. So perception must include to look what is behind. Or we must have questions. I see something and I have questions. If I do not have questions, then I cannot really catch what is around, what I perceive around me. So from this perception, body reactions we have, they tell us we are unwell, for example. They tell us about the pain we have. They tell us about emotional feelings. I'm happy or I'm angry. So all these are expressions of mental functions, and certainly with the age 5, 6, the very young should learn to understand and to interpret what is going on around the world using mental functions.
Okay, do they naturally gain these mental functions, or is it the responsibility of the social environment and parents to nurture and enable them to understand how to develop these?
Yes, we need to nurture, obviously, or we have in our biological development a kind of a software. Yeah?
Okay.
This software is there, allows thousands of options, but we need to learn to deal with this software. So it means we need to learn to have questions. We need to learn to find answers for questions. We need to learn to see why this happens or that happens, or what are consequences of certain behavior, certain ways of talking. And this doesn't just happen like that. This is education. They must be allowed to ask questions, allowed to look behind the surface of realities. They must be allowed to question television content, for example. Or mom says, you are not allowed to look this, you are not allowed to have a mobile phone now, and you cannot look this or that. Means a small kid wants answers. Why this not, and only that.
So that because I say so attitude is not going to help with their development. It should always be yes and no and the reasons behind it, so they can build up that knowledge of understanding there's always something beyond what they see, and I suppose that would help with their perceptive development. Would you agree?
Yes. In the past, 30 years, 50 years, or 80 years ago, 100 years ago, the father said, that's fact and basta. Yeah. We don't talk, we don't discuss. Shut up your mouth, yeah. For example. That was education. This can't work today.
No.
So today, the very young generation, they have lost the rules. Because there's so many information every day they got in, they cannot identify the value of what they see, of what is allowed to do or not, and rules with other people, with other kids, with parents, etc. So they must learn that. And this learning process requires from parents the corresponding support and always explaining because of this, because of that. And yes, you can do that and look here and look behind, for example. In the modern society, this kind of perception is not very active. Now, people see just something, but not the reality behind. They don't have the questions.
Do you think that's because we kind of live in almost like a two-click society? Anything we want to know or learn is literally just 2 clicks away, and it stops us from maybe thinking for ourselves, yeah, in a sense, and almost assume that we can get anything and everything from our device or the TV or anything around us other than our own ability to think about something.
Yeah. If you go with a kid in a supermarket or in a big commercial center, the kids 4, 5, 6 years old or 10 years old, they see this, they see hundreds of things, and they cannot understand that they cannot have it.
No.
Yeah? So they will be confused. Back home, they're frustrated. Yeah? So to balance this challenge for the very young, there is a need to talk about everything, why you can't have this, why you can't have that, and this damages into that direction, or this has a certain effect that is not recommended, etc., etc. Yeah. So this is building up a human by guidance, but it requires that parents know how to do it with their kids.
Okay, so we've looked at perception. Now, according to yourself, Dr. Schellhammer, there's 22 mental functions, and they can all be found in his book, Architecture of the Mind. Fantastic book, and it's lovely to actually understand not just the developmental stages, but the importance at different ages and what's happening. So all that can be found in your book. Now, when we think about your mental functions, obviously perception is incredibly important and is happening early on. Having read the book myself, I found that you were discussing a little bit about decision making and building up knowledge and having these as part of our mental functions. When is this happening and how so?
Yeah, the first 4 or 5 years, I would say, is exploration, guided explorations. And then with the year 6 up to 8, 9, the very young must learn to take decisions. It's always the same. They want 2 things, but can only have one of both. Yeah. So they have to take a decision. So they need to learn to find the right decision with this age. So with schooling in the school, year 1, 2, they can ask, why do I have to learn? Why do I have to learn this and that? I want to rather do this or that. So there are certain rules, there are certain activities, mental activities necessary to develop mental functions in the context of school, in the context of life, in the context of peer groups.
So Dr. Schellhammer, we've touched on a few of the mental functions for those early years. I would like us to jump to the early adolescence years, as so much is going on through that stage. Now, according to the United Nations, adolescence is between the age of 10 and 18, but the early adolescence is between the ages of 10 and 14 years, and that's where we're going to focus on next. Now, obviously, during this stage, a lot is going on for your child. They're understanding their place in the world a little bit more, they're questioning themselves, they have high emotional roller coaster acts, if you like. And one thing that starts to become a little clearer to them is obviously love, the ability to love and to be loved. Now, according to your book, this is one of the mental functions. What's the importance of this mental function?
Love is about, first, understanding reality. Secondly, the value of reality. So they're very young, they realize what they can get or not, and how they have to treat everything that is around them in life. So love has to do with respect. Respect to get, respect towards others, and love also is an expression of love life. Means
and yourself.
And yourself.
Okay.
Yeah. So the consequence is that already, I would say, with the age 7, 8, the very young can and should learn to become responsible, step by step responsible for what they get, for what they want, and how they behave, how they talk, and to contribute in a family life, for example, in a way that everybody is in a development, always in a development, and everybody in the family needs respect, or to give respect and to receive respect. That includes certain rules.
And would that almost tie into one of your other mental functions, which is something you describe as emotional intelligence? Would that be connected to understanding how to love yourself, others, the environment, how to conduct yourself, to always be in that respectful manner? Or is it something different?
Yeah, there's a lot in play around this emotional intelligence. Certainly, one thing is each human has a certain register of feelings, of very positive, very negative. Our body gives us messages about our health, about the way we think, about our behavior, and we need to learn to understand the message from our, let's say, body reactions. That seems to be important in the context of love, because without love, both cannot operate. So love is about responsibility, what we do, and love is also about the development of what we get. And for this, we must become responsible. Parents have to teach them, to train them for such a development.
That makes sense. I suppose we learn from what's being modelled around us, so without the correct support and encouragement, those mental functions are not going to develop as well as they could. Another area I was really interested in when reading your book is how you talk about spiritual intelligence, visualization, meditation. These are ways of enhancing mental functions, or are they a mental function within themselves?
I would say first, independent functions.
Okay.
So we all dreams. We have dreams every night. We can remember or not. There are certain differences from culture or people, etc. It's very difficult to talk about dreams because on the one side there's a magic interpretation in most books about, and this doesn't really help. But dreams always have a message, and we can learn to understand this language. That is one thing. Secondly, meditation. we can feel how our body reacts in many ways, in many situations, and this is always an information. We can ignore this information. We are used to ignore information from our body, and the world is used to ignore dreams. So we can close our eyes, sitting at home somewhere, and we can visualize what we think. We can visualize what happened before. We can visualize our own behavior in certain contexts of life, about other people, for other people, etc. Meditation has to do with energy from the body. Has to do with using this tool, these mental functions, to balance inner life. We all have an inner life. Yeah, and there's a lot of chaos. And we can all learn, or the very young already can learn to balance, to meditate with music, 5 minutes, 2 minutes. And anyway, adults should do this weekly or monthly. Yeah.
And actually, I know with meditation, it's very popular at the moment and even suggested as a really positive form of self-help, a form of empowerment. So obviously it's something that should really be focused on more in the early years and have it as, like you say, a mental function that can be used throughout the years to keep that internal balance. Would you agree?
Yes, I would even say that this function helps us to balance the entire body, the entire mind. We can be angry, and to reduce this anger, for example, we feel depressed and we can find our inner center. We can learn with meditation to become strong inside. We can even go with meditation back into the past. It's not a kind of therapy, it's just self-healing or self-understanding. So you can sit somewhere and why I'm sad, why I'm angry, for example. And with visualization, for example, we get answers. You have questions in life, always dreams give an answer. Try that way, try this way. This was not really good what you have done here or there. Dreams are the engine for spiritual development, for human development in general. So if we take away love, if we take away care, if we take away this mental function called, let's say, the dream functions, if we take away the visualization as a capacity or a mental function, what remains? Archaic humans. Yeah. And that is what we have since 20,000 years, and not much changed since then.
So by gaining an awareness of all these different functions, we can actually understand how it makes a more secure, fulfilled human being. And perhaps if more of us were doing it, we would have maybe a more organized society as well. So Dr. Schellhammer, obviously during this discussion we've talked about several of the mental functions. What I want to know is, and I'm sure there's viewers out there as well, if we go through stages in our life and we haven't had this awareness that we need to focus on one function or another to become more aware as a human being, is there a way of developing them later on, maybe in your late teens or your adult years, or are we just going to be functionless human beings?
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not.
There are thousands of books on the market, good books, from other books we don't want to talk. Everybody must learn, and this should never end during life. We have mental functions and a body that wants from us, requires from us to learn endless. Every day, every week, every year, from the very young to the very old. The very young, they don't want to learn. There is so many adults, if not billions, to talk about, they don't want to learn.
No, yeah.
So they stop quite early with going to school and etc. And I think they know the word, they know a lot, but they know nothing. So there's one principle. We need to nurture our body, our mind, our mental potentials. We need to nurture with knowledge, the right knowledge, to understand ourselves, to understand the world, to understand people, to understand the mistakes, on this planet. And there are a lot of mistakes on this planet. And this helps us to become complete, to become a very mature person, to become rich in the character, in the expressions, and that is a contribution to the world. Anything else is never a contribution.
And I suppose when we think about that and understanding our mistakes, for example, if we understand them, is that the first stage of moving forward in a more successful direction? If we understand the mistakes, then maybe we can change them.
In the general picture said, looking back 3,000 years or 5,000 years, governance didn't change. They didn't learn anything up to today. And it's the same with humans. Since thousands of years, up to today, only very few people really learned for changes. So first, people need to learn to see what is going wrong, and they need to become co-responsible. They cannot just delegate to governance, to the politics, to the religion, to the economy, etc., all solutions. All humans need to contribute by learning, studying, endless studying. Isn't it also important in a relationship, between man and woman? They need mutually, daily, weekly, monthly, to learn, because we all change with the age, we change with every year, we change with life conditions, and we must learn. And learning is the principle of human life. Not learning is a lost life.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, you touched on a really interesting topic there about relationships. If you're interested in understanding the psychology of relationships or the ways of managing a relationship in a more positive way, you can write a comment below and we can have a discussion on that. And the same with meditation, visualization and dream theories. If this is an area you're interested in, leave Dr. Schellhammer a comment and we can give an in-depth discussion on that topic as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.